To another sewing tutorial. My name is Ann-Sophie and I'm the person behind Sewing with Solana, and today we're gonna make the Dolly dress, which was once known as a Lolita dress, but I decided to rename it to the Dolly dress. And a lot of you have been asking for me to release the sewing pattern because a lot of you want to make a dress that doesn't have an open back and that's a bit more covered up, so this dress is perfect for you. And this is just such a cute dress. I used to make it for my clothing brand in muslin cotton and white. And one of my friends actually wore it to get engaged. Then I made it for a customer and she got married in it. So it is a pretty casual dress, like you can wear it every day, but I think you can also dress it up super nicely for special occasions. So yeah, very exciting. It's a beautiful dress. We have it's a wrap dress. Then we have like sleeves, kind of like the sleeves that I'm wearing now. We're gonna put elastic in like I did here. So you need to use some elastics for the end of the sleeves. You can, I'm gonna use elastic that's around 1 centimeter wide. You can also use half a centimeter or up to 2 centimeters. But yeah, something around 1 centimeter wide elastic is what you need. And then when you purchase the sewing pattern, I'm gonna link it down below. You will also receive a file with a size guide and some information about how much fabric you need. But yeah, once you have printed out the sewing pattern, just make sure you print it out at a scale of 100%. I've printed mine out in A4, so I also used A4 paper. If you're in the US, you can print it out in US letter because you have a different paper size than we do. Or if you want to save some time, you can also print it out in A0, which I think this is a good sewing pattern to print out in A0 because there's a lot of pages and it would actually save you a lot of time. If you print it out in A0, there's going to be 2 pages that need to be printed just because it didn't fit on one page. But yeah, so now once you have printed out the sewing pattern, it's time to put it together. Glue it together, cut out your right size. If you're in between sizes, I would recommend sticking mostly to the bust measurement, and then we can cut out our fabric. So let's go. So I've put all my pages in order together very roughly now. So we started with A1 and then all the A's go in one row, the B's go in one row, C's go in one row, and then the 1s go this way, 2, 3, and so on. So I always like to put everything together roughly. And then I take some tape and now I go page by page gluing everything together. So here we have A1, then comes A2, and you want to make sure that those lines here on the side line up perfectly. And then you want to put it right on the dotted line here of the previous page. And then I just take some tape, stick it together, and then I just continue doing that for all the other pages. So I'm going to start cutting out my fabric. I'm going to start with the front of the skirt, and you need to cut it out 2 times, which is why I have folded my fabric in half here. So instead of cutting it out 2 times separately, I can cut it out at the same time. So I'm going to pin it now onto my fabric and then I can start cutting it out. Here's a little tip for you now, because later on we need to hem this side here, because this is going to be the front of the skirt and they're just going to overlap later. So I would recommend you now, when you take the sewing pattern off, just stick a needle in here. So later when we get back to the sewing machine and start sewing, you know that you need to hem this side and don't accidentally start hemming the top or the bottom here. Here we have the back piece. We need to cut it out 1 time on fold. So I'm going to place it on here. And then I'm also taking the back lining, which needs to be cut out 1 time on fold. So now we need to cut out the front. We need to cut it out 4 times in total. So I folded my fabric in half so I can cut out 2 at a time. And then here's a little notch where you need to make a little cut, because this will indicate where you need to attach the straps later on. And then also here where the dart is, I always stick a needle here in this very corner. And then I will make 1/2 centimeter deep cuts over here. And for the sleeve, we need to cut it out 2 times. And then here, As you can see, like here are 2 notches marked and here's 1 notch marked. And the 1 notch means that this is going to be attached to the front of the dress, like the front part. And this, the 2 notches, means it's going to be attached to the back. So make sure you're going to make 2 little cuts here, 1 little cut here. So later on you know that this side needs to be attached to the front and this to the back. Then the back of the skirt, you need to cut out 1 time but unfold. So here where it says fold, I folded my fabric in half. The last piece to cut out are the straps, and you need to cut them out 2 times and unfold. So they're going to be pretty long. So now that we have cut out all our pieces, we can start sewing, and I would just recommend starting with the straps, so just we can have them out of the way and just use them when we need them later on. And I want mine to be relatively thin, so I'm going to fold them in half and then sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance away from the folded edge here. If you would want to, you can also make them a bit wider and just sew with a 2 centimeter seam allowance from the folded edge here. Completely up to you. So we're going to do that to both of the straps now. And now you can cut off the excess seam allowance. And then I take my loop turner. If you don't have a loop turner, you can just use a safety pin. And I have sewn one of my ends closed just because this is gonna make the end of the strap look much nicer. But if you don't have a loop turner, then you have to leave both ends open if you're doing it with a safety pin. But those loop turners, like I saw at Spotlight, I just ordered one on the weekend for a friend, and they're only $10. And I remember when I got mine in Barcelona, this one, it was so cheap too. So I feel like if you're sewing a lot, you should get yourself a loop turner. It will save you a lot of time. So here are my 2 straps now. I have ironed them and now we can just put them to the side. So now we take the back lining and we're just going to overlock this part here. And now we're just going to fold the overlock part here towards the inside and sew it onto the back facing. Now we take the back piece, and if your fabric would have a good and a bad side, which my fabric doesn't, you would want to make sure that the good side is facing you, and then we take the back lining and you want to have the 2 good sides now facing each other. And now we're going to pin and sew it along here. And now I'm going to overlock it. And now we're going to fold it apart here with the good side facing us, and you want to sew the seam allowance onto the back facing. So while you sew, just pull them apart a little bit. So now I have ironed it and then I have cut it all straight here because it's pretty normal that they don't line up perfectly. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move my needle to the right. You don't have to do this, but this makes it easier for me attaching this later to the front. So I've moved my needle to the right, and now I'm just going to sew those two pieces here together. And I'll do the same on the other side. And now it's time to sew the darts for the front. So here we have 2 layers, and now I'm gonna stick a needle in here, right where the needle is coming out of now. And now it's time to sew the dart. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold it in half here, make sure the 2 little cuts that we have made line up perfectly. And then we're gonna sew a line from here where the notch is to where the needle is. And then we're gonna repeat this for all 4 front pieces. And then here I don't front and back stitch. And then here where we have front and back stitch, you can just cut off the thread. But over here, I haven't front and back stitch. So instead what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make 3 knots. And then I'm just gonna leave a centimeter of thread, but cut the rest off. And now we iron it, and we're gonna iron the dart down. So here's what it's gonna look like. And this is the inside, so they are ironed down now. Now you take one of the front pieces, then you take another one, and you want to make sure that the 2 good sides are facing each other. And then what we want to do is we want to sew them together here. And then here where the little notches that we made, we take one of our straps and we're going to sew it in here. I would recommend you to take, so with mine, here is the end that looks nice, and then here's one of the open ends. So you're gonna take this end that doesn't look so nice, and I would recommend you just put it right on top of the notch. So yeah, so now I'm first gonna pin everything together. So now I'm going to start sewing here, and I'm going to sew down here, and then when I get to the strap, I'm going to sew over it 2 times and then sew until the end. And then we're going to repeat exactly the same to the other 2 front pieces. And now we can cut the little bit here off, and then we go to our iron, and we're going to flip it the other way and iron it this way. So here we have our 2 front pieces. Here's the first one, then here we have the second one. And what we're going to do now is we're going to attach them to the back. So I'm just going to lay my back piece with the good side facing me, and then I take one of the front pieces, and now I'm going to sandwich this shoulder part in between here. So I'm going to pull this apart and then sandwich it in between the 2 front pieces here, pin it together, and then sew it together. And now I'm going to sew from here to over here. And then I'm gonna cut this little corner here off. And now we're gonna repeat the same step for the other shoulder part. So I'm gonna take the other front piece, fold them apart, and now sandwich it in between here. And then sew it together again. So this is what we have so far, which is pretty good. And now the next step is to attach the skirt. And I would say we just start with the front part of the skirt. So we can put this to the side for now. And then we take our two front pieces. And you remember where at the beginning we put a needle in here. So I'm going to pull them apart, keep this needle in here, stick this needle over here. And then we're just going to start with one of them. And what we're going to do is we're just going to fold it inwards 1 centimeter and then 1 centimeter again. And then we're going to do this till the end. If you would want to, you could pin it together and then sew it, or iron it and then sew it. I think I'm just going to go straight to my sewing machine, fold it and sew it as I go. So now we need to gather the skirts together, and my tip is now lay the two skirt pieces in front of you the way they will be when you attach it. So here's the two hems and the two good sides are facing us. So we need to gather this part together and then we need to gather this part together. So I'm just going to start with this one and gather this together. So I'm changing my stitch length to 4 and I'm moving my needle to the right. And now it's important that you don't front and back stitch. And then we can put this back here again and we take the other one. I'm just going to cut the thread here off. And now we're going to do the same over here. And now we're just going to start with this one here. And then we take the top part of the dress. And this one here we need to attach to this side, and we're gonna sandwich it in between. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open this up here and then place this part right in the corner here, right below the notch, and pin it in place. And then I'm going to pin them together over here. And then I'm going to gather the fabric together so the skirt has the same length as the top of the dress. So I'm just going to pull on one of the threads and just make sure you gather the fabric together equally. And now we can sew from here to over here. So one thing, just move the stitch length back to 2.5 and I move my needle back to the middle again. So this is what it looks like, and now we're going to do exactly the same to the other side. So here this is going to be the outside of the dress, and then I take my skirt part. So this is the good side, and then I take the good side of the skirt and put it on top here, and then I sandwich it. Now we're going to do the same to the back skirt piece. So this is what it looked like when we cut it out. Like this was the sewing pattern piece. And the fabric was folded in half, and if we unfold it now it looks like this. So we're gonna do the long stitch. We're gonna change the settings back to of the sewing machine back to a long stitch, and I move my needle to the right, and then we do the long stitch together the fabric from here till here. And then I move it back to 2.5 and back over here again. Good side of the back piece is facing us. And now I'm gonna attach it here. And then the same on the other side. And now I can gather the fabric together. And now you just want to gather it together equally, and then you can pin it in place, and then we're gonna sew it. So now we're gonna sew from here till over here. And now it's time to start focusing on the sleeves. And the sleeves we also want to gather together. So we go one by one. And then I would just recommend gathering, like doing the stitch for this part here. And you're gonna do that for both of your sleeves. And then here where there's one notch, this is then what you have to attach to the front. Where there's two notches, you attach to the back. And the gathered part we're gonna gather on top of the shoulder. So now I have one armhole laying in front of me, and you want to make sure that it's the good side. And the easiest way to check is here's the back lining, so this is the bad side, which means this here is the good side. Then we take one of our sleeves, and here where we have one notch, I'm going to attach on here. And first I'm going to pin this part together, then I'm going to start pinning this part here together with this end of the sleeve, and then once we get towards the middle, I'm going to start gathering the fabric together and pin it in place, and then we can start sewing. now here is the dress. It looks like a huge cape right now, but we're gonna get there. You need to decide now if you want the dress to be like this or like this, because we need to leave a little hole in the middle here where we can then pull the straps through. So if you want this side to be down and this on top, then it means you need to leave a little gap here on the side. But if you want this like this, then you need to leave a gap like here. I think honestly, like, to me it doesn't matter. I think I'm just gonna have it maybe like this. So that means I need to leave, because here the strap here we're gonna pull through there later, and then it's gonna come out here to tie it. So I'm just gonna stick a needle in here now, just so I know that over here I need to leave a gap. So here's my front piece now, and here is where I want a little opening to be. So it's gonna be where you attached the skirt onto the top part of the dress. And I'm just gonna overlock now around 8 centimeters, so 4 centimeters this way and 4 centimeters this way. And then you're gonna do exactly the same on the back piece. So you're gonna overlock 8 centimeters, 4 centimeters of the skirt and 4 centimeters of the top part. And then later, when we're gonna sew them together, we're gonna close the sleeve, and then we're gonna stop here, leave a couple centimeters open, then close the rest of the skirt. And for the other side of the sleeve, we will just sew the sleeve and the skirt all closed in one go. And then another thing I'm going to do now, this is the end of the sleeve, so I'm just going to overlock it from here to here. And I'm going to do that for this sleeve and also for the other one. So now we're going to start with the side where we want to leave the gap. And we're gonna start with the sleeve. So we have the good side of the sleeve facing us. So the bad side is facing the table. And now we're gonna fold the sleeve in half. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna line up the seam here, pin it in place, and then we pin down the sleeve. So now I have pinned the sleeve and the side of the skirt together, and what we're going to do here, where we have attached the skirt, we're going to leave around a 3 centimeter gap. So I'm just gonna stick a needle 1.5 centimeters away, like down, and 1.5 centimeters above, to remind me later to stop sewing here. So I'm gonna start over here where the sleeve starts, so all the way along here, and then I'm gonna stop sewing here, and then I'm gonna start here again and sew the rest of the sleeve closed, which means there will be a gap here. And then for the other side of the dress, I've already pinned it together as well, and we're gonna start sewing here where the sleeve is, and this time we don't need to stop, we can sew it all in one go. And now when we're doing it to the other side, we're gonna overlock until a couple centimeters before our gap. So now we're going to do exactly the same sleeves that I have here, and what we need to do is we need to create a tunnel for the end of our sleeves. What I'm going to do now first is I'm going to cut off the elastic. I'm just going to wrap it around my wrist. I don't want it to sit too tight, so I'm going to make it this long, cut it times 2. And so you have some reference. My elastic is 18 centimeters long. And now you have a few different options. What you could do is you could either pin everything in place, or you can go over to the iron everything, or you can just fold it. And so as you go, you just want to make sure that there's enough space for the elastic to sit comfortably and to do the stitching. So my elastic is 1 centimeter wide. So I'm going to fold the end of my sleeves around 2 centimeters down. So yeah, I'm just going to stick some needles in here now. You can also iron it, completely up to you. Now when sewing, it's just important that you leave a gap because we still need to pull the elastic through. So I'm just going to start sewing here, so all the way around, and then I'm going to finish here again. So then here will be the gap where I can pull the elastic through, and you also do the same on your other sleeve. So now we put a safety pin on both of the ends, and you're just going to start pulling it through the opening until it comes out on the other side again. And you should try that the other end, that this end stays outside. If in case it goes in there again, just push the other safety pin out. And now that both ends are out, you can take off the safety pins, then you overlap the 2 ends. Make sure that the elastic didn't get twisted along the way. And then we're going to sew the elastic together here, and then we can close the gap. Okay, so we're nearly finished with the dress. I just put it on now because now we need to figure out how long or short we want it to be before hemming it. I've made the pattern a bit longer than what I would wear, so I'm going to make my hem pretty wide. Completely up to you now. Just try it on, figure out how long or short you want yours to be. And then you could either stick some needles in it or just measure it, but I'm going to show you what mine looks like so far. And I have already hemmed it in here, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold mine up 2.5 centimeters and then 2.5 centimeters again, just to make it a bit shorter. I just think completely, like, so up to you how long or short you want yours to be. I just think with the long sleeves and everything, I don't know, I like my dresses short, so I'm gonna make my hem pretty wide, but this looks so nice. I'm finished now with my Dolly dress. I'm going to show you the whole dress in a second. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much if you've watched this whole tutorial, if you followed along, if you've purchased a sewing pattern. It means really so much to me. And send me photos, send me videos. If any steps were unclear, reach out to me, leave a comment, send me an email, send me a message on Instagram. Just get in touch with me and we'll figure it out together. And I try to upload sewing tutorials every week. So I hope I see you next week again. Goodbye.